You bought this badge from a costume store. Officer Nathan Cole held the gold credentials beneath the parking lot lights and laughed as though the truth had already been settled. A cold rain moved across the pavement behind a shopping center in Arlington, Virginia, turning every headlight into a silver reflection. Deputy United States Marshal Isaiah Brooks stood beside an unmarked sedan in plain clothes, his hands visible and his voice controlled. He did not look at the badge in Nathan's hand. He looked past him at a gray sport utility vehicle rolling slowly toward the eastern exit. "Officer," Isaiah said, "you have 30 seconds to decide whether your prejudice matters more than a federal operation." Nathan's smile disappeared. "Do not threaten me." That was not a threat. It was the last warning I can give you without compromising this mission. Less than 5 minutes earlier, Nathan had arrived after a caller reported a black man watching vehicles near the rear parking area. The caller had described no crime, no confrontation, and no danger. Still, Nathan had stepped from his patrol car with his conclusion already formed. He ignored a white man loading boxes into a nearby truck and walked directly toward Isaiah. Isaiah identified himself immediately. He presented his badge, matching identification, an official verification number, and the secure code for Operation Silent Harbor. Nathan rejected each one without making a single call. "Real federal officers do not stand around dressed like this," he said. Isaiah had heard suspicion before, but this was not confusion. Confusion asks questions. Prejudice refuses answers. 2 hours earlier, Isaiah had positioned federal teams within a 2-mile radius of the shopping center. Operation Silent Harbor was designed to recover stolen evidence and detain a man accused of pressuring a protected federal witness. The operation depended on silence. No marked vehicles, no visible uniforms, no unnecessary movement. Isaiah wore a dark jacket and ordinary clothes because looking powerful would have made him useless to the mission. Now the target's vehicle was moving because Nathan's flashing lights had exposed the surveillance point. Isaiah's encrypted phone vibrated on the hood of the sedan. Nathan reached it first and turned the screen toward himself. A message appeared: primary target leaving containment zone. Federal units inbound. Nathan shook his head. "You expect me to believe this?" Isaiah's eyes remained on the gray vehicle. "Call the number printed on my identification. I am not calling anyone connected to fake credentials." A second patrol vehicle entered the lot, and Detective Sarah Mitchell stepped into the ring. She studied the scene, then the badge in Nathan's hand. The shape, seal, and identification number looked correct. "Nathan," she said carefully, "those credentials appear legitimate." He raised one hand without facing her. "Stay out of this." Sarah looked at Isaiah. He was not pleading. He was calculating distance, time, and consequences. Imagine standing there while a man with local authority rejects every fact you provide, not because the evidence is weak, but because he cannot accept who is holding it. Isaiah checked the dashboard clock. 20 seconds. Nathan stepped closer and raised his voice. "You are not in command here." Isaiah finally met his eyes. "That is another fact you failed to verify." Far beyond the shopping center, engines turned onto the service road. One from the west, another from the north. Sarah quietly copied the verification number into her phone. Nathan continued speaking, unaware that federal vehicles were approaching from 3 directions and that every person inside them was waiting for Isaiah Brooks to give the next order. Sarah Mitchell entered the verification number, while Nathan Cole continued insisting that the scene belonged to him. The call connected before the gray sport utility vehicle reached the eastern exit. A calm federal dispatcher requested Sarah's badge number, department, and location, then asked her to repeat the identification printed on Isaiah Brooks's credentials. Sarah did. The pause that followed lasted only 2 seconds, but it felt longer beneath the cold rain. Deputy United States Marshal Isaiah Brooks is the field commander of an active federal operation, the dispatcher said. "Do not interfere with his communications. Federal teams are approaching your position." Sarah lowered the phone and looked directly at Nathan. "His identity is confirmed." Nathan glanced at the screen as though the official answer had somehow created a new problem instead of resolving the old one. "You do not know who was on that call. I used the secure number on the credentials." "That proves nothing." Isaiah watched the gray vehicle turn toward the exit lane. His encrypted phone vibrated again on the hood of the sedan, but Nathan remained between him and the device. "Move away from my equipment," Isaiah said. His voice was still measured, though every second now carried consequences beyond the parking lot. Nathan squared his shoulders. "You will wait until my supervisor arrives." Isaiah looked past him toward the western entrance. "Your supervisor is no longer the person you should be waiting for." One engine stopped. Then another. A dark sedan entered from the north while two unmarked vehicles moved in from the west. At the eastern exit, a federal sport utility vehicle positioned itself behind the gray target car without blocking civilian traffic. Doors opened. Men and women in plain clothes stepped onto the wet pavement, several wearing jackets marked United States Marshals. No one ran. No one shouted. They moved with the quiet precision of people who already knew where they belonged. Nathan turned slowly, his expression changing as each new arrival focused not on him, but on Isaiah. A tall woman in a navy raincoat crossed the parking lot and displayed her federal credentials before stopping beside the unmarked sedan. Supervisory Deputy Marshal Catherine Reed took one look at Isaiah, then at the badge still in Nathan's hand. "Deputy Marshal Brooks, are you secure?" The question settled over the scene. Sarah heard the title clearly. Nathan heard it too. Isaiah nodded once. "I am secure. The primary target is moving early. Activate the secondary containment plan and direct Deputy Marshal Daniel Ruiz to the southern route." Catherine repeated the order into her radio. Federal teams responded immediately. The gray vehicle stopped near the exit as another unit redirected traffic around it. Two agents guided shoppers toward the storefronts, keeping the area calm and orderly. Isaiah extended one hand toward Nathan. "Return my credentials and step away from the phone." Nathan hesitated. The badge had not changed. The identification had not changed. Only the number of witnesses had changed. "I received a suspicious person call," Nathan said, trying to recover the authority that had filled his voice moments earlier. Catherine looked at Sarah. "Did he receive a verification number?" "Yes." "An operational code?" "Yes." "Did he use either one?" Sarah shook her head. Nathan finally placed the credentials in Isaiah's hand. Isaiah clipped them inside his jacket, retrieved his phone, and read the latest message. The target had been contained, but a second vehicle connected to the stolen evidence was leaving the 2-mile surveillance area. "Daniel has visual contact," Catherine said. "He is waiting for your instruction." Isaiah looked toward the rain-covered service road. "Tell him to maintain distance and guide the vehicle toward the south checkpoint." Catherine relayed the order. Every federal unit moved according to Isaiah's command. Nathan stood silent as the man he had dismissed took control of the operation without raising his voice. Isaiah turned to Sarah. "Preserve your call record and every body camera file from this scene." Then he looked at Nathan. "You were given the truth 3 times. What happens next will show why you refuse to accept it." Isaiah Brooks returned his attention to Operation Silent Harbor as Catherine Reed coordinated the federal teams across the 2-mile containment area. The gray sport utility vehicle remained stopped near the eastern exit, but the second vehicle carrying the stolen evidence had already reached the service road. Deputy Marshal Daniel Ruiz followed from a safe distance, waiting for Isaiah's instructions. "Maintain visual contact," Isaiah said into his encrypted phone. "Do not reveal your position. Guide the vehicle toward the south checkpoint and let the technical team close the route." Daniel confirmed the order. Nathan Cole stood several feet away beneath the fading rain, watching every federal agent respond to the black man whose authority he had refused to recognize. Sarah Mitchell activated the evidence preservation function on her body camera and instructed Nathan to do the same. "That is unnecessary," Nathan said. Sarah looked at him without lowering her voice. "It became necessary when you rejected official credentials and interfered with a federal operation." Nathan's expression tightened, but he could no longer silence her without creating another recorded decision. Isaiah studied the live tracking map. Operation Silent Harbor had been planned to recover digital files connected to the intimidation of a protected witness. If the driver of the second vehicle realized the primary target had been contained, months of evidence could disappear before the federal team reached the checkpoint. Nathan's delay had created the risk, but Isaiah refused to let anger shape his response. "Catherine, move the technical unit 1 mile south and keep civilian traffic on the western lane," he said. "Daniel will direct the vehicle into the inspection area." Catherine relayed the instructions. Federal vehicles shifted quietly through the surrounding streets while the teams remaining in the parking lot kept shoppers away from the restricted area. No one created panic. No one raised a voice. The operation became more controlled with every decision Isaiah made. Imagine watching the man you dismissed as an imposter command a complex federal mission with the calm discipline of someone who understood that real authority did not need a performance. Nathan looked toward the credentials clipped inside Isaiah's jacket. "You could have identified yourself more clearly," he said. Isaiah turned slowly. "I gave you my badge, my identification, a verification number, and a secure operational code. You were dressed like an ordinary civilian. Federal authority does not become valid only when it looks familiar to you." Sarah lowered her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the sentence. Nathan tried again. The caller reported suspicious behavior. Isaiah nodded. That justified questions. It did not justify refusing every answer. Catherine approached. With an update. The primary target had complied with federal instructions and was being transferred for processing. Daniel had guided the second vehicle toward the south checkpoint, where the technical team was prepared to secure the evidence. The mission could still be completed. Sarah opened the restricted coordination notice sent to her department at 6:40 that morning. The bulletin advised local officers that authorized federal activity would occur within a 3-mile zone and provided a secure verification contact. Digital records showed Nathan had opened the notice before his shift. Sarah turned the screen toward him. "Your account marked this message as read." Nathan stared at it. "I received dozens of bulletins." Isaiah's expression remained composed. "Then you arrived uninformed, rejected the facts placed in front of you, and treated your assumption as evidence." His phone vibrated. A message from Daniel appeared across the screen. Second vehicle contained. Digital evidence secured. Silent Harbor complete. Isaiah read it once and exhaled. The operation had survived the interruption. Nathan's explanation had not. Catherine requested that his supervisor and the department's internal affairs liaison report to the scene. Nathan looked around at the preserved recordings, the federal communication logs, and the agents waiting for Isaiah's next command. His badge remained on his chest, but it could no longer protect the choices captured by the record. Captain Robert Hayes arrived 11 minutes later with an internal affairs lieutenant and a department legal advisor, all three stepping into a parking lot that no longer looked like an ordinary local scene. Federal vehicles remained positioned near the exits while evidence technicians completed the transfer from Operation Silent Harbor. Isaiah Brooks stood beside Catherine Reed, reviewing the final custody record for the recovered digital files. Nathan Cole moved toward his captain before anyone could address him. "I responded to a suspicious person call and followed procedure," he said. Robert looked past him towards Sarah Mitchell, then at the federal credentials clipped inside Isaiah's jacket. "Did the individual identify himself?" Nathan hesitated. He presented documents that appeared questionable. Sarah's body camera remained active. He presented a valid federal badge, matching identification, a secure verification number, and an operational code. "I confirmed his identity through the official contact line." Robert turned back to Nathan. "Did you attempt that verification before she arrived?" The situation was developing quickly. Catherine opened the federal timeline on her tablet. More than 4 minutes passed between Deputy Marshal Brooks offering the verification number and Detective Mitchell completing the call. Nathan glanced toward the screen, but did not answer. The Internal Affairs Lieutenant requested that all local recordings, dispatch communications, and digital access logs be preserved immediately. Sarah submitted her call history and the restricted coordination notice Nathan had marked as read before his shift. The legal advisor examined the bulletin and asked Nathan whether he remembered opening it. "I received too many notices to study every detail," he said. Robert's expression hardened. "Then you cannot claim you followed a procedure you chose not to review." Isaiah finished signing the evidence transfer and approached the group. Robert introduced himself and offered a formal apology on behalf of the department. Isaiah accepted the acknowledgement with a quiet nod, but his attention remained on the larger failure. "Your officer did not make one uncertain decision," he said. "He was given several lawful opportunities to correct himself and refused each one." Nathan interrupted. "I was protecting the public." Isaiah looked at him. "The public was protected by verification, coordination, and restraint. You rejected all three." Imagine hearing your own defense collapse because the record preserved not only what you did, but every moment when you could have chosen differently. The Internal Affairs lieutenant asked Nathan to surrender his patrol credentials pending a preliminary administrative review. Nathan looked toward Robert. "Captain, this is excessive." Robert extended his hand. What was excessive was deciding that a black man's federal credentials were false before you examined the evidence. The parking lot became silent except for rainwater moving through the curbside drain. Nathan removed his badge and department identification, placing them in Robert's palm. The metal made a soft sound against the leather credential case. Isaiah watched without satisfaction. He understood that accountability was not a performance and that humiliation could never repair humiliation. Sarah approached him after submitting her recordings. "I recognized something was wrong before I made the call," she said. "I should have challenged him sooner." Isaiah met her eyes. "Then make sure your statement includes that hesitation. Systems change when people tell the whole truth, including the part that makes them uncomfortable." Catherine informed Robert that the United States Marshal Service would provide federal communication logs, the operational timeline, and documentation of the delay. The investigation would not depend on memory or departmental loyalty. Every fact would have an independent source. As the federal teams prepared to leave, Nathan stood beside his patrol car without his credentials, watching the last evidence vehicle turn toward the highway. Operation Silent Harbor had survived his interference. The official record of why he interfered was only beginning to open. The preliminary administrative review began the next morning inside Captain Robert Hayes's conference room, where every screen displayed a different part of the same encounter. Nathan Cole sat beside a department representative without his badge or patrol credentials. Sarah Mitchell sat across from him with her written statement, preserved call history, and complete body camera recording. The Internal Affairs lieutenant joined Robert at the head of the table, while Catherine Reed, an illegal advisor from the United States Marshal Service, appeared through a secure video connection. Isaiah Brooks was not required to attend, but he submitted a recorded statement because he understood that accountability could not rest on anger. It had to rest on evidence, sequence, and choice. The review began with the original dispatch call. A customer had reported a black man standing beside an unmarked vehicle and watching traffic near the rear parking area. The caller described no threat, no unlawful conduct, and no emergency. Robert paused the recording. "This justified a professional inquiry," he said. It did not justify a conclusion. The next screen showed Nathan's body camera footage. Isaiah appeared calm, kept his hands visible, and identified himself immediately. He presented his federal badge. Nathan dismissed it. He provided matching identification. Nathan questioned that too. He offered the secure verification number and the operational code. Nathan refused both. Then Sarah's recording captured the moment. She said the credentials appeared legitimate and Nathan ordered her to stay out of the encounter. No one spoke as each refusal entered the official record. Imagine watching your own certainty return through a camera that preserved every opportunity you had to correct yourself. Nathan argued that false credentials existed and that caution was necessary. The Internal Affairs lieutenant nodded. Caution explains verification. It does not explain refusing verification. Nathan looked toward his representative but received no answer. Catherine placed the federal operational timeline on the screen. For minutes and 19 seconds had passed between Isaiah's first offer of the secure number and Sarah's successful confirmation call. The delay was long enough to expose the surveillance point and force the federal teams into a secondary plan. The review then turned to the restricted coordination notice issued at 6:40 that morning. The department's digital audit log showed that Nathan had opened the message for 13 seconds and marked it as read. The notice warned of authorized federal activity within a 3-mile area and listed the same verification number Isaiah later provided. Robert removed his glasses. "You told me you did not review this notice." Nathan shifted in his chair. "I did not remember the details." Sarah spoke quietly. "You did not need to remember every detail. You only needed to use the number when he gave it to you." The final evidence came from Nathan's own report, drafted less than an hour after the incident. He had written that Isaiah became uncooperative and refused to provide verifiable identification. The body camera showed the opposite. Isaiah had provided 4 forms of verification, while Nathan rejected each one. The Internal Affairs lieutenant highlighted the contradiction. This is not a disagreement in perspective. This is a factual misrepresentation. Nathan's face lost the confidence he had carried in the parking lot. Isaiah's recorded statement played last. His voice remained steady. My credentials made this incident impossible to ignore. The concern is what happens to citizens who provide the truth and do not have federal agents arriving to confirm it. When the recording ended, Robert authorized a formal independent misconduct investigation and ordered a review of Nathan's prior complaints. The meeting had begun as an examination of one parking lot decision. It ended with the possibility that the decision had never been isolated. The formal independent misconduct investigation expanded over the next 7 weeks, and each reopened complaint revealed another moment when Nathan Cole had treated suspicion as proof. Investigators interviewed motorists, store employees, dispatchers, supervisors, and officers who had worked beside him. A black high school principal described being stopped after an evening fundraiser because Nathan claimed the luxury sedan he was driving did not match what he expected. Dispatch confirmed the registration within minutes. Yet Nathan continued questioning where the principal worked, how he could afford the vehicle, and why he was traveling through that neighborhood. A black emergency room nurse recalled showing her license twice while driving home after a 12-hour shift. Her complaint had been closed as a misunderstanding about communication. A delivery contractor said Nathan accused him of using another person's identification even after the photograph, address, and employer records matched. Each incident had once been filed separately and explained away with careful language. Together, they formed a pattern that could no longer hide behind paperwork. Sarah Mitchell attended every interview. She was authorized to observe. She had worked beside Nathan for nearly 5 years and remembered moments when his questions felt different depending on who stood in front of him. She had accepted his explanations because challenging a colleague seemed harder than believing the encounter had simply gone wrong. Now the recordings forced her to confront what hesitation had protected. Imagine realizing that unfairness survives not only through the person who acts, but through every witness who decides that silence is easier than discomfort. Captain Robert Hayes reviewed the reopened files with growing concern. Several supervisors had approved Nathan's reports without comparing them to dispatch records or camera footage. In 2 cases, complaints had been closed before the citizens were interviewed. Robert requested an outside audit of every bias-related complaint filed during the previous 5 years. The problem was no longer limited to one officer. It included a system that had been more interested in ending complaints than understanding them. Catherine Reed provided the complete federal record from Operation Silent Harbor, including the verification call, the operational timeline, and the restricted coordination notice Nathan had marked as read. Isaiah Brooks continued working active assignments and declined public interviews, even after a bystander's parking lot video spread across national news. He did not want outrage to replace evidence. When investigators asked why he had remained calm, Isaiah answered, "The danger was not that he questioned me. The danger was that he rejected every lawful way to correct the question." Nathan's representative argued that the older complaints reflected difficult patrol conditions and imperfect decisions made under pressure. The lead investigator replied that pressure could explain caution, but not a repeated refusal to accept verified information from black citizens. Near the end of the 7th week, Sarah discovered a training record buried inside Nathan's personnel file. 3 years earlier, he had completed an interagency course on federal credentials, secure verification procedures, and the identification used by the United States Marshal Service. His final examination score was 96%. Robert placed the certificate beside the parking lot footage. Nathan had known what Isaiah's badge should look like. He had known which number to call. He had known the procedure designed to prevent exactly what happened. The excuse of uncertainty disappeared. What remained was a decision, repeated across years, to trust prejudice more than proof. The disciplinary hearing began 9 weeks after the parking lot encounter inside a county government chamber where every statement would become part of the permanent record. Nathan Cole sat beside his department representative without a badge, patrol credentials, or the confidence he had carried into the rain that night. Captain Robert Hayes, Detective Sarah Mitchell, the independent investigators, and the County Oversight Council occupied the opposite side. Catherine Reed appeared through a secure federal connection, while Isaiah Brooks sat quietly near the rear of the room. He had not come to demand punishment. He had come because the truth had spent years being divided into separate files, and he wanted every piece placed together where no one could look away. The hearing officer began with Nathan's body camera recording. His voice filled the chamber as he dismissed Isaiah's badge, questioned the matching identification, refused the secure verification number, ignored the operational code, and ordered Sarah not to interfere. Then the federal timeline appeared on the central screen. 4 minutes and 19 seconds. That was how long Nathan had been given to replace assumption with procedure. He had used every second to protect the conclusion he made before examining the evidence. The restricted coordination notice came next, followed by the digital record showing that Nathan had opened it before his shift. Then investigators displayed his training certificate from the Interagency Credentials course. 96%. He knew the appearance of United States Marshal's identification. He knew the verification process. He knew why local officers were required to use it. Imagine watching the excuse of uncertainty disappear beneath proof that you had been trained for the exact moment you chose to mishandle. Nathan's representative argued that the operation had been confusing and that officers sometimes made imperfect decisions under pressure. The hearing officer looked toward the evidence. Pressure may explain caution. How does it explain refusing for methods of confirmation? No answer followed. Sarah testified about the moment she recognized the credentials and hesitated before challenging Nathan. He was not trying to determine whether the badge was real, she said. He was trying to preserve his belief that the man holding it could not be real. Robert presented the reopened complaints. The high school principal, the emergency room nurse, the delivery contractor. Each person had provided valid information. Each had been questioned beyond what the circumstances required. Each report had reduced the encounter to a communication problem. Together, the files showed a pattern of unequal treatment supported by inaccurate written accounts. Nathan was finally invited to speak. He insisted that he had never considered himself prejudiced and said every decision had been made for public safety. Isaiah listened without interruption. When the hearing officer asked whether he wished to respond, he stood. "This is not about the label Officer Cole gives himself," Isaiah said. "It is about the standard he repeatedly applied when black citizens gave him facts that should have ended his suspicion." He looked toward the hearing panel. "My federal credentials made my experience difficult to bury. The others had no federal team arriving to confirm their dignity." The findings were issued one by one. Nathan had violated identification procedures, ignored interagency requirements, interfered with a federal operation, submitted materially inaccurate statements, and demonstrated a sustained pattern of racially unequal enforcement. His employment was terminated. His law enforcement certification was referred to the State Board for permanent revocation. The department was ordered to correct the affected records and notify every citizen whose complaint had been reopened. Nathan lowered his eyes as the decision entered the record. No one raised a voice. No one needed to. His career ended through evidence, testimony, and the choices he once believed would never be examined together. Outside the chamber, reporters asked Isaiah whether justice had been served. He paused before answering. "Accountability happened today," he said. "Justice will happen when the next black man does not need a federal badge before an officer decides to believe the truth." The weeks after Nathan Cole's termination changed the department in ways no single hearing could measure. Captain Robert Hayes authorized an outside review of every bias-related complaint filed during the previous 5 years, and the County Oversight Office began comparing written reports with dispatch logs, body camera recordings, and citizen statements. The work was slow because truth hidden inside administrative language had to be reconstructed one decision at a time. The black high school principal received a corrected record confirming that his conduct had been lawful and cooperative. The emergency room nurse learned that Nathan's report had included claims unsupported by the camera footage. The delivery contractor was notified that his original statement, once reduced to a few vague sentences, had been restored in full. None of them celebrated. They had lived for years with the knowledge that the department trusted an officer's description more than their experience. Imagine being told that your truth is finally official only after a federal marshal survives the same refusal. Isaiah Brooks understood why the letters of apology felt incomplete. He met privately with the affected citizens and listened without defending the institution that had failed them. The principal asked why it had taken federal attention before anyone reopened the files. Isaiah answered carefully. Systems often hear authority before they hear pain. The purpose of reform is to make sure pain no longer needs a powerful witness. Sarah Mitchell joined the review team as a departmental liaison. During her first meeting, she admitted that she had noticed warning signs long before the parking lot incident. I told myself that uncertainty was not enough to challenge a colleague, she said. But silence gave certainty to the wrong person. Her honesty encouraged other officers to report encounters they had dismissed as minor. Robert ordered mandatory documentation whenever an officer disputed valid identification, and supervisors could no longer close a complaint without reviewing all available recordings. Catherine Reed helped establish a direct federal verification line for local agencies, supported by annual interagency training and digital audit records showing whether officers used the system. Isaiah supported the changes, but warned against treating procedure as a substitute for character. A verification number can correct a mistake, he said. It cannot force someone to value the person standing in front of them. Nathan appealed his termination, arguing that the county had surrendered to public pressure. The appeal panel reviewed the body camera footage, the restricted coordination notice, his training score, the inaccurate report, and the pattern revealed by earlier complaints. The decision was upheld. Several months later, the state certification board suspended his law enforcement credentials while considering permanent revocation. Isaiah received the notice while preparing for another assignment. Catherine asked whether the outcome brought him satisfaction. He folded the letter and placed it beside his operational files. Satisfaction would make this about him and me, he said. Responsibility makes it about everyone who never had a federal team arrive. Outside the office window, morning traffic moved through Arlington as though nothing had changed. Yet inside the department, forgotten voices were returning to the record. Officers were learning that silence carried consequences, and authority was being forced to answer a question it had avoided for years. Not whether one badge was real, but whether the system had treated every person's dignity as real. 6 months after Operation Silent Harbor, the county department adopted a permanent accountability policy designed to prevent another officer from treating assumption as evidence. Captain Robert Hayes announced the changes inside the same government chamber where Nathan Cole's actions had entered the public record. Sarah Mitchell stood beside him, now serving as deputy coordinator for a newly formed professional standards team. Catherine Reed represented the United States Marshal Service, while Isaiah Brooks sat near the rear of the room in a dark suit, refusing every request to place his name on the policy. This cannot become a rule that matters only because a federal marshal was involved, he had told Robert. It must protect the person whose name never reaches the news. Under the new system, officers were required to document every disputed identification, use official verification channels before escalating an encounter, and preserve all recordings whenever race or unequal treatment became part of a complaint. Supervisors could no longer close those complaints without comparing written reports to dispatch records, camera footage, and citizen testimony. An independent community panel would publish quarterly findings showing what had been investigated, corrected, and left unresolved. The high school principal, emergency room nurse, and delivery contractor attended the public meeting. Each had received a corrected record, but none of them allowed the department to treat paperwork as complete repair. The nurse described how Nathan's questions had followed her home after every night shift. The contractor explained that he had changed his delivery route for months because returning to the same neighborhood made him feel as though his identity could be challenged again. The principal looked across the room at the uniformed officers and said, "The deepest harm was not being questioned. It was learning that every answer I gave became another reason not to believe me." No one interrupted. Imagine a room once used to defend authority becoming a place where authority finally learned to listen. Several weeks later, the state certification board completed its review and permanently revoked Nathan's law enforcement credentials. The decision cited his refusal to follow federal verification procedures, his inaccurate reporting, his interference with an active operation, and the pattern of unequal treatment revealed by earlier complaints. Nathan had once believed his badge gave him the power to define what was real. In the end, the record defined him. Isaiah returned to the Arlington shopping center on a cold morning near the beginning of winter to meet Sarah before another interagency operation. The parking lot looked ordinary. Shoppers carried coffee toward the stores. Cars moved beneath pale sunlight. Nothing marked the place where his authority had been denied. Sarah asked whether he still thought about those 30 seconds in the rain. Isaiah looked toward the eastern exit where the gray vehicle had once tried to leave. I think about the people who were never given 30 seconds to prove themselves, he said. Then he clipped his credentials inside his jacket and walked toward the waiting federal team. His badge had not become more legitimate when the vehicles arrived. His authority had not begun when others recognized it. The truth had been present from the first moment. Nathan's downfall came because he believed truth required his permission, and justice arrived when the system finally learned that no badge should stand above it.